Good evening. And this evening, I am feeling super excited to be talking to Gayle Thomas, a face that I met many, many, many weeks and months ago. A lady who has an incredible energy, who, when I first decided to embark upon this project, I knew that I wanted to talk to because there was something about Gayle when I met her. And it was an EFT teaching session. I think it was EFT Center, I think they're called. Is that correct?
Yeah.
We ended up in a session together, split into groups, and Gail, as part of the training, we were talking, and she had a story, and it was captivating. And in the moments that I met her, I felt that this was someone who would go far, and the way that she was traveling, her life was going to touch a lot of people. But I think the best way for this to proceed is actually Gail to introduce herself and say about what she does. And let's start at that point. So, Gail, tell me about you.
Thanks, Lucinda. Firstly, thanks for being interested in having a chat with me. I'm sure this conversation can take many directions. My name's Gail. We met on a course for further training, shall we say, for therapists and coaches, and it included hypnotherapy and NLP and various tools and techniques, tapping, EFT tapping.
Absolutely.
Various techniques to help people. So that's how we met, just to reiterate how we met. And what I do now is, I would say, I teach people how to channel, teach people how to meditate, and I do some spiritual coaching along with that. At the time, I was predominantly working as a holistic life coach, and that's why I was on the course with you, to learn more tools. I was also on my healing journey after experiencing breast cancer. So a number of things were going on in my life, and I was doing a lot of, say, spiritual work, a lot of meditation at that time. So a lot was going on in my consciousness during meditation. I was starting to channel, and here we are. I mean, this is what I do now. It sort of went to the top of the pile in terms of the modalities that I've used. A long time ago, I started off as a yoga teacher and yoga therapist and a meditation teacher, and I worked with all kinds of people, and I did that for quite a while. So that's how I started, and then went into coaching, holistic coaching, and then became a channel. And it wasn't intended, it just happened. Of course, the cancer wasn't intended, it just happened. But I think the channeling came about as a result of the stress and the turmoil that I went through in having cancer. So if that hadn't have happened, I'd probably still be a holistic coach, utilizing lots of modalities, from yoga and meditation and breath work and tapping and hypnotherapy and NLP. But with what happened to me subsequently, things changed, and I felt I had sort of easier ways to help people to help themselves.
And now, and do tell me if this is too much of a personal question, but I mean, I'm a believer that often we end up in the situations we are helping people or investigating or having journeys of discovery because of things that a lot of people consider negative, things like illness, disease, trauma. When you were diagnosed with cancer, can you tell me a little bit about what went through your head? Because there are very obvious ways of dealing with that, but you took a very unusual uh, direction, shall we say, and one which I think that the listeners would be interested in.
It's funny, when you just mentioned all of that, I had this kind of feeling just come into my body about the memory and the time and the kind of feeling I had leading up to my diagnosis. For the last few years, I started to believe that I was probably going to experience cancer in my life for no particular reason, even though I had a lot of stress, particular stress with divorce from my first marriage. And I think that it was always there. I think this was always supposed to happen. So when I found a lump in my breast, I did the usual thing. When you feel a small lump in your breast, you think, oh, it's just a swollen gland. It's my time of the month. That's usually what it seems to be. And it'll go away. It'll stop feeling tender. And then I thought, well, this one doesn't really feel tender. It doesn't have any feeling at all. So I started to think, well, when I go and see the gynecologist about this, they'll probably tell me it's cancer. And then I'll just think it's quite cute. I'm going to think of it as a tiny little cauliflower, a tiny little piece of broccoli, a tiny little gift for change. Mm-hmm. And I did end up getting diagnosed with cancer. And initially I took it in my stride because at the time I was living in India. We were surrounded by great healthcare and hospitals, and lots of hospitals for women and with great oncology departments. And after being diagnosed, it was, I was placed in a room just outside of the MRI room that had just had my scan. And I was with my husband and they said, yeah, it's cancer. But we've taken the liberty of calling ahead the oncologist, the breast oncologist at this hospital. Why don't you go straight there now? He's waiting for you.
Wow, great.
You don't get this in the NHS in England. So, and health, while there is no NHS in India, healthcare and treatments are so much more affordable, so much more. So, I didn't really have too much of a chance to think about it too deeply. And we went straight away to see the oncologist and he confirmed it. And he said, we can do a biopsy of it. Why don't we do that now? So I went to get a biopsy of it and I got this feeling come over me again that probably wasn't going to be a good idea for me. If we knew it was cancer, and he'd already said, we can operate on you tomorrow if you want to come in. I said, yep, absolutely. So I didn't get the biopsy. I changed my mind on that. I had a sort of funny feeling about that. And I had the lump removed within 48 hours of being diagnosed. Then I was supposed to embark on, the other kind of treatment. And that was just all as far as the hospital and the oncologist were concerned. I'd also let the Marsden know here, the hospital in London. So I was now on their records. So, there's an agenda and a kind of way to deal with a diagnosis like this. And so, it was very much expected to, go through treatment and then be on medication for the next 5 to 10 years of your life for the particular kind of breast cancer I had. And I started to feel very, very dark about that. After the operation, after the surgery, we had to, wait for specific tests to come back to see what kind of cancer it was. And I started to get a very dark outlook. And I started to think about my kids. I've got 2 daughters. And I started to feel very desolate. It was a very sinister feeling. It felt like black, heavy tar in my stomach. And that's when I thought, shit, you're in trouble now, because of the feeling that you can feel inside that is killing you faster than anything else. That feeling, the feeling is so heavy and it's so sickening. It almost made me want to vomit. It was hard to contain. And it felt like something, that's a horrible word to use, possessing me. It was something that didn't feel a feeling that shouldn't be in somebody. It was so dark. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, you really got to try harder on this one, because I could feel how toxic this fear was. It was just so terrible, and I had a brother that had cystic fibrosis, so he was aware that he had a terminal condition. It's not so terminal now, but it was then. And he spent much of his life with severe depression, worrying about dying. And I could relate. And I thought, no, I don't want to do this. I've got to find a way. I've got to get out of this. I've got to get this horrible, dense feeling out of my stomach. And I went down the rabbit hole. I started watching lots of stuff on YouTube and on Gaia, you know, Gaia, the TV platform. And I just started talking to lots of people and reading lots of stuff and learning about how lots of people have healed without going down the conventional route. And that's when I learned that actually a lot of the things on the conventional medical path aren't so conducive to healing. They're, you know, the cut, burn, poison method isn't really getting to the root cause. And I had to look deeper within myself about really what was the cause, and, you know, what kind of personality and what kind of behavior traits or lifestyle traits had brought this on. And I knew I had to have a long, hard look at myself, you know, I mean, realistic and very honest. And I was, you know, that's not a nice thing to do, but I definitely wanted to do it because it's that or fear, the kind of fear, that dark feeling inside. And so I started on a number of things while living in India. I started on high dosage intravenous nutrition. So several days a week, I was had a line in my arm, and very high doses of vitamin C, ozone, vitamin D, vitamin B12, zinc. What else? A couple of really expensive ones that I can't remember the name of. It might come back to me. But that really help with the detox pathways in the body. I started to make the habit of sleeping in the day. So I'd have a siesta. I started eating keto. At the time, I thought that was a good idea because I understood the sugars and carbs were feeding cancer. Ultimately, I didn't stay on the keto, but I started to eat a lot more vegetables and fruits, and started to meditate. I mean, I'd always done yoga, but I started to meditate much more seriously for longer periods of time. I'd done that before during my stressful divorce, sort of 10 years earlier, and I knew it can be really transformative. So I knew that this was going to be one of the most important things, which was just to change the belief I had around cancer, the belief I had around who I was, the belief I had around healing. It had to do a 360 degrees. I had to run in the opposite direction to the place on the path that got me to that place. And I knew that for all the good in the world that eating salads and sleeping well and having intravenous vitamin C going in your arm could do, it wouldn't be as powerful as trying to eliminate stress and the stress reaction in the body and your belief, my belief around the whole thing. So this continued, and then I came to learn about water fasting. And as soon as I learned about that, it just felt like the best scenario. It made the most sense to put my body into autophagy. And I looked up a few places, and I decided I wouldn't do it at home by myself because I wasn't sure I'd have the willpower, and I wanted to be monitored. So I went to a very famous, well-known, well-respected place, which is called True North in Santa Rosa in America, near to San Francisco, shall we say. And being there and among those incredible people, researchers and doctors, they gave off such a confidence and positivity around the process that it was hard to believe that that wasn't going to work. So the idea was to put the body into autophagy and to clear out the rest of the cancer cells, right? And to clear out any other dysfunction that was going on a cellular level in my body. And I did that. It was very transformative. I noticed during the fast that all my senses were heightened. There was some more sort of extrasensory perception going on as well. I meditated during that time, and this was sort of during the pandemic as well, actually. Eventually, when I got back to India, I carried on with my meditation. Now, at this point, after the water fast, I'd refed and became salt, oil, and sugar-free vegan. Whole plant food diet. They don't call it plant-based because that's kind of a tricky phrase, because that means that you can have plant-based food. And as long as there's something from a plant in it, there could be also a lot of crap. So they call it whole plant food. They talk about eating the whole plant from the root to the petals, the root to the leaves.
Incredible.
In its most unprocessed form, without the added toxins, the addictive toxins, which they call, of salt, oil, and sugar. So, I returned to India on the SOS vegan diet, and I continued with the big amounts of meditation and breath work, pranayama, and sleep and prayer and affirmation. And then I started to channel. And once I started to channel, once I made that connection, as if I hadn't become, maybe 90% confident that I'd completely batted the cancer out the park, and would probably never get it back again if I stayed in that way of dieting and thinking. The channeling just made me 100% sure that I was well, and I'd completely turned it around. The whole connection.
Yeah, so I just interrupted you there. Can you just clarify what you mean by channeling for anyone who's not familiar with that?
Yeah, so connecting to a wider or more expanded consciousness.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it could be your higher self. It could be something beyond your higher self that's communicating through you. So becoming like a conduit to other kinds of information and feelings and perception that's not usually available in normal waking consciousness.
And you reached this stage in your journey, would you say, through your elongated meditations that you were doing? I love the fact that what you're mentioning is things like the breath work, pranayama, the prayer, the sleep. It really does seem that there's often a recipe to healing, to actually coming to this place where the body suddenly goes into this rest and digest sort of situation. And then have that channeling experience. It almost feels like the world kind of said, yes, Gayle, you're doing the right things, and came and gave you a big hug. And said,
yes, there's that. But I think when you feel that connection, suddenly I was no longer afraid of death. That just went. It's, I think, in much the same way as someone who's had a near-death experience, they see something on the other side and then they're suddenly resuscitated and they're like, I've seen it. It's, my experience wasn't that. It wasn't an NDE. But that connection is quite hard to put into words. How you just, it took the wind out of the sails of the fear of death. Because I realized experientially, we can hear it and we can know something theoretically. I realized experientially there's no such thing as death.
Gosh, yes.
There's perception and consciousness outside of this kind of casing that we're wearing, and you can get to that. So in a sense, if you can get to that and communicate and feel more of that which is outside your physical body, if you feel more expanded than your physical body, suddenly you lose the kind of sting of the idea of the death of the physical body.
That makes sense.
And that connection makes you understand. I guess if I'd reasoned or taken it further at the time, it would have made me realize that no matter what, I'll always be with my girls and I'll always be able to communicate them, and my husband. But it's, more the fear. He's an adult, I'm a mum. That's, I think any mum's worst nightmare, to think that they're going to die prematurely before the kids are grown. But that connection just completely booted any fear out the park. It was just so overwhelming. And of course, I had an experience where I felt Jesus, and this was the first occasion where I felt this channeling. I felt Jesus. It sounds weird to say the word like that, because I'm hearing myself, and it, there are many times in my life I would have laughed at myself, like, what? Because, I maybe grew up as a Christian, but we weren't practicing Christians. I certainly don't know the Bible. From cover to cover, I don't go to church. I'm spiritual. I believe in God. But I wouldn't say that I belong to any particular religion. I believe in Jesus as a human being. If you'd asked me that before I had an experience with him, I would have said, yes, I believe he did exist. The same way the Buddha, I believe, existed. And there was probably something very special about him. I wouldn't have argued or denied that, but it wasn't something that was really prominent in my mind. But when I felt him, it was undeniable. It was undeniable. It was extremely humbling. And it was, of course, much more bigger than any idea a mind could conjure. It was an ineffable feeling. So when I say things like that to you, I'm sure it's easier to understand how, of course, that's the experience of Jesus, then followed by who I then went on to channel, completely booted fear out of the park. It's kind of, if you were to feel it, you would understand.
And just sorry to interrupt you again. And so, I think from my perspective, I've always been very cautious. I've grown up in an agnostic family. My father was brought up a Catholic, and that unfortunately put him off a lot. There is a tendency of people who are associated with religion, when they have these connections, associations, to feel that they should put a name to them or sort of give them an identity. Do you think that or do you know if maybe other people have similar experiences and then maybe feel that it's maybe not Jesus as such, but something else? Do you feel maybe that this was your way of naming something that was so beyond anything that you could have possibly imagined? The highest you could go was him. And then please don't take offense to that. I just trying to give a different angle to it.
Yes, I think that's good to consider a different angle to it. I think it's a really good idea to discuss all of this and look at what ifs and other scenarios and ways of perceiving it. I've heard it since called Christ consciousness, and I thought, I wonder if, in my naivety, called it Jesus when I should have called it Christ consciousness. Since then, I haven't felt that. And at the time when that happened, the easiest way to describe it is I was in a kind of trance-like state, although I don't actually really think it is a trance-like state. It feels like you're in trance, kind of thing, when you're under hypnosis. But you're in a very blissful state. There wasn't cognitive activity happening in me. So to be analytical about it post-event, there wasn't too much thinking. It was immediate, and it was a knowing. Okay. It was a different level of consciousness. The only cognitive thing that came through my mind at the time is, this is happening, this won't last long. Ooh. So I was aware that this might be a couple of seconds, so I just, I just kind of let it engulf me. And how can I put that into other words? I guess if you're on holiday and you've gone out to see dolphins or something on a boat, and you see the dolphin and you've just got a glimpse of them, you just sort of embrace it and you freeze and you just let it happen.
Yeah, you can have that happy moment, that warmth, that experience, that energy,
Yeah.
kind of, you
So,
safeguard, don't you?
so I'm not sure if that answers your question, Lucinda, but
It does.
there wasn't much cognitive activity going on, and I'd quite like to be able to say to you, oh, he comes every day, or the consciousness comes every day,
Of course. But
but it doesn't.
no.
Yeah.
No, that's great, because what it tells me is that this is something that could happen to anyone. They could read it in any way that their conscious mind would. That was your unique experience, and you felt it, and it wasn't a decision you made. And that's just kind of interesting from the cognitive way of, sometimes you're meditating and you think, oh, well, have I left the oven door open? It wasn't like that. So just to move on, what then happened in your life really is kind of fascinating, because you actually started to channel a being, would we call your entity?
Yes. Yeah. I would better describe it as a group.
Gosh. Busy.
So an entity, I guess it can mean plural. It's very difficult to not get tied up on the words, because it's not an individual. And when you say group, it's like I'm seeing or hearing multiple voices or seeing multiple beings. I'm not. It's an energy that is more than one, but is individuated.
Okay. Yes, I hear that. And that kind of sounds a little bit scary in some ways.
Yeah, it could sound scary. I appreciate that. It doesn't. It's not. It's
Okay.
not. And it's the most natural feeling in the world. It's like one of these unconscious things that you do in your life, such as dreaming, or perhaps something that we do when our eyes are open, yawning. It feels okay to do it, and it feels natural. In fact, while you're doing it, you feel your body goes in a relaxed state. So that's how it feels to me. It feels more blissful than a yawn. Um, but it's a different kind of consciousness again. So the other kind of consciousness that we're not so great at talking about, because we don't have the language to describe it, because it's transdimensional in nature and it's somewhat compartmentalized in our minds. Another kind of state of consciousness is we experience it and we're not in our normal waking consciousness. So it's difficult to talk about dreams, for example, because dreams happen in a completely different mode of being, a different mode of consciousness. So when you awaken and you try to talk about it, it doesn't make sense, and it seems silly when you tell someone else, and it's weird. It doesn't translate very easily into normal waking state. Same as being unconscious. Or do you see what I mean? So channeling is a completely different way of being that doesn't have the same ways of describing it as you do your states or your situations that happen in the normal waking consciousness.
No, that makes sense. It's
Yeah.
beyond what we're technically capable, really, of articulating with the language that we have so far managed to facilitate
Yes.
in our culture and our society.
Except for, sometimes when you're laying in bed and I don't know, I think this happens to some people, not all people, because not all people even remember that they dream. But for me and lots of other people, it depends, maybe if you're a light sleeper, I don't know. I'm aware that I'm dreaming, and sometimes I can say to myself, oh, I'm dreaming. Oh, I must be very cold. The dream's got really bad, or I must need to get up and go to the loo. I'm dreaming. Let's stop this dream now before it starts to get bad.
Yes. You leave.
But I'm aware. So there is two parts. There
Yeah.
is two parts somewhere. There's the observer, and then there's the dream. Same way as when you meditate in the normal waking state, there's the observer and then there's the mind. So it is possible to sometimes experience that feeling, which is similar to channeling. When you're aware that you're dreaming, you know that the dream is going on, but you carry on in the dream and you're quite engrossed in the dream, and the dream is quite real to you, and you're still feeling emotions from it, whether it's, you know, love or fear or whatever's happening. You're like, I'm dreaming. I don't know if you've experienced that. So channeling is like that. You can't get too cognitive, but, you know, I'm channeling. You're in it, you're feeling it, you're observing it, you're taking a back seat. So there's awareness of it, but you can't use the same kind of way of describing it in normal waking consciousness terms.
And this channeling, what do you feel the purpose of it is for you, or for what it's facilitating to others? Why is it, what is it, why is it come to you, do you think?
So there's my opinion on it, and there is what they say on it. So I'm going to try and give you the most
Can we have both?
back, naive way of describing it.
Okay.
Right, this would be mine, which is, I believe that this would happen to just first and foremost be able to help people to put things in more plain and simple terms that go in on a certain level of their consciousness. Because what comes through me isn't really via the cognitive part of my mind. It's not via the cognitive part of my psyche. It's quite pure in a sense, and it's untampered with. If I were to recite to you something that just said, I'm tampering with it slightly. I mean, I do all the time, because I translate what they say into, you know, YouTube, Instagram posts and things on my website and everything. And of course, it's come through the cognitive processor, and I'm, you know, giving my take on it. They say they come to help at this time, those sensitive people, empathic people, people that have an awareness that there is more experience that's available to them to access about who they are and what they can do. It's there to activate them, using the words that come through me, but within that is kind of light energy coming through the vibrations of those words, activating and working on them. And it's kind of a dialogue with their higher self. So if I'm channeling for somebody, they're asking me a question, they think it's, you know, the question's coming from their mind. There is some level of needing to hear that they're going to receive that's going on from them, that I believe, what Tarp said, is their higher self facilitating a situation so that they can hear something they need to hear.
Yes.
And quite often, Tarp, who I channel, they say this is actually you having a dialogue with yourself under the guise and illusion, or, you know, permission slip, to use a phrase that another famous, a very famous channel uses. I'm not famous. Uses permission slip for something to happen, to enable someone to absorb something or to learn something that they needed to hear.
Yes. So it's almost, to simplify that even further, it's kind of, it's almost like a phone line to hear,
Yes,
to the answer that you need.
consciousness.
Yeah. And I suppose the next thing that springs to mind for me is, in terms of people who are struggling with something that is causing them to be in a state of distress, either physically or emotionally, and in need of healing and support. This where channeling can come into its own? Can this offer something above and beyond the other modalities, or would you say it's actually part of the package of things that maybe someone should consider if they're trying to heal?
I think you should only consider it if you have any kind of understanding or belief on some level that this is going to be effective for you, because there's no point coming in with resistance or being freaked out or weirded out by something like that. Having said that, I don't really get people that come to me that don't believe in it. So I think belief is a big part in that. And I think that's very interesting because belief is a big part in self-healing anyway. You have to believe. Take the channeling out for a second. If you're going to self-heal from any condition and you want to self-help, you've got to believe on some level that's possible. And in a sense, 100% that's possible. I mean, it's quite obvious that Tarp think that, but I mean, I can even reason that myself, that, you know, we are non-physical beings as well as physical beings, and thought precedes manifestation. The thought precedes any physical manifestation. And in a sense, you know, you can call it a causal realm or source or larger consciousness, including your higher self in that. And everything is created on an energetic level. And if there's momentum to it, then it eventually will manifest. So in a sense, we're we're multi-dimensional beings casting a shadow into a 3D world, right?
Yes.
So by the fact that there's a shadow being cast, it means there's a delay, there's a lapse between the causal element, the thought, and the creation of a thought, or, you know, of a concept, to it actually being cast or projected into the physical realm. So healing has to happen on that kind of non-physical, multi-dimensional realm for it to manifest and display and materialize in the physical realm. So, you know, the channeling with Tarp enables a person to hear what they need to hear from themselves or from Tarp or from any other guide that is wishing to communicate or expanded consciousness to them, to hear on a non-physical level, not just, you know, cognitively, but also on a non-physical level. And they are, I can see, this is my opinion now, they are particularly useful for those that are sensitive to this already. They say they've come at this time to help activate, clear and unblock those that are more sensitive, in order for them to go on and help other people. So it's a facilitation to help others facilitate others, to set off a wave of positive change, evolution, shall we say, self-development.
And now the position that you find yourself in life, from your journey, from someone who was facing death, who had to literally, you know, decide which direction you were going to go in. You went an unconventional direction, found all these healing modalities, and then came to channeling. Sorry. What do you now do? What is your work that you offer to others? How do you support people who are interested in actually going further into these sort of investigations?
Well, I'm channeling to people, first and foremost, private sessions, and then I do group sessions, online and in person. And Tarp, using my hands, they do hands-on energy transfer, which is where you an individual can get to feel the energy. So, you know, activating chakras or working on particular energy circuits within the body, unblocking and clearing. So there are the two parts to that. There's just the verbal channeling, and then there's the channeling through my hands, where someone is laying down on a bed and I just go into trance channeling them, and I put my hands where I'm directed. Then there's the training. I'm training people to channel. I'm very interested into how to sort of distill it into words and instructions. I mean, because I'm taught meditation for a long time, and I like the teaching aspect of the explaining the abstraction and the mechanics of it. Even for people that find it difficult to meditate, there are ways to feel consciousness and experience perception beyond the five senses, and it's quite nice when you start to feel that. And it doesn't have to be because you want to channel anything. It could just be so you feel more connection, you know. And I think that's becoming more and more important anyway, which we can come back to later. But the other aspect of that, which is carrying over what I'd always done before, is coaching. So I call it spiritual coaching now. So with that coaching will come a channeled part from Tarp, where they give a map and a pathway and a direction for an individual. And then I do the coaching aspects with it myself afterwards, where we can sort of ground down into sort of practical tools and steps, using all the modalities that I'd learned before. But that doesn't happen so often, because usually it's quite complete, you know, that you get from Tarp. It's just if someone wants to have their hand held for a few months and be accountable, you know, the coaching side can really kick in. Absolutely. You know. But I think ultimately I'm not the kind of person that, you know, I get shy. I don't really want to stand on a stage and channel in front of people. I prefer to train people, teach people how to do it, and write about it.
Write about it. Do tell.
Yeah. So I mean, ultimately, you know, I'm better teaching and being one-on-one with people and in small groups, or private channeling, or private channeling to small groups.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And that's all information that can be found on your website, isn't it? Do you want to share your website address?
Thanks, Linda. Yeah, so my website is Gayle, Gayle -Thomas.com. Thanks. Yeah.
And you're on which social media site?
Which social media? I'm on Instagram, Tarp Channeling.
TikTok?
TikTok, no, I'm too old for that, I think.
Are
you?
Too old.
Are you on TikTok?
Oh, I am. Yes, be careful. It is the deepest, darkest rabbit hole, but no one is too old for it. Trust me. The people, you can find everybody there now. But unfortunately, you probably are being watched by places far, far away that might want to know your geolocation. So best probably to hold back if you can.
Right. Yeah.
So sensible sticking with where you are, but if you decide to go down that direction, go for it. And I suppose now the question that I'd like to ask is, if someone hears this, sees this, reads about you, and they kind of think, oh, well, it sounds interesting, but I'm not sure I'm into, and this isn't me. I'm not sure I'm into all this woo woo, this kind of talking to other stuff. I mean, let's be honest. Got to be a bit of, you know, what would you say to them to kind of, you know, what would kind of come to mind? I mean, because obviously if they're really like that, they shouldn't bother, because it's a bit like hypnosis. If you come to it and you're not ready to just quit smoking or whatever, it won't work. But if there's just a hint of them that thinks, actually, well, could I go and do that? What would be the tipping thing for you to say to them?
I think you were right. If someone's not into it, there's no point pushing someone. If they were curious, I'd invite them to have a free discovery call. I offer discovery calls, or attend one of the free events that I do. I think it's usually about once a month or once every 2 months. I do a Tarp channeling session and a live Q&A, a live stream Q&A, where we take questions from the audience and Tarp just answer. They could attend one of those, see if they get weirded out. I mean, there's a lot of anticipation I think people have, and I get it, because, you know, I know about mediums and psychic people and things like that, and you know, doesn't have to be everybody's thing, does it? Yeah. But I think when people see how natural it is for me, I'm literally just meditating, and then, you know, I let them start talking through me, and I'm there to face them at the end of it. I'm not sort of running away. I think people can see I'm not just trying to get loads of money out of people, and I've got no other reason to do this. And what comes through me is just helpful. Yes. I mean, they're just trying to help, and I don't think they've ever said anything that's questionable. It feels very peaceful and harmonious in the room when I channel and within me. Yeah, so I'd say try it if they were considering it, or have a chat with me. Yeah, just have a chat with me. I'm here to talk about it. Yeah.
Wonderful that you're offering those opportunities to people, because so often I think many people who are sick or ill, they're on a reduced budget, they're interested in something, but then cost is prohibitive, but to have that opportunity is fabulous. And in terms of your self-care tools that you would use, can we just go through those again? So it's the sleep, it's the EFT, it's the what sort of diet are you on now, might I ask? Is it
So vegan, the SOS has gone out the window, sadly, the salt, oil and sugar free. However, I will go back to that clinic at some point and do another water fast just for health maintenance. I won't go back and do it for as long as I did before. But I really liked the way it made me feel. It was so good. So mainly vegan, mainly vegetables, a lot of salads. I eat very big salads in the evening. I'm not the best. I mean, I'm having coffee and I'm having sugar again. I think what came back is the confidence. Because when you have cancer, you're always worried about it coming back. And that went, as I said, that went as soon as I started channeling completely, and I sort of live a lot more of a normal life. I don't have stress. I take my happiness and my stress-freeness very seriously. I actually put that first now, making sure I'm not stressed. Even if it means saying no, I'm quite boundaried. I'm quite, I've got quite a lot of work to do, and I'm quite ring fenced around that. I want my energy to go on the writing. There's so much that's coming through me from Tarp, that I just really need to get it done. Like I know that my part in this is more on the teaching side of it, rather than being a performer and getting a large following. I just rather it was down while I've got the momentum, and while they're coming through me, I assume that it will always be here, but you never know. And it's great also, I have to say, Lucinda, that in teaching now, it's been a few batches of people hearing their stories. Some of them channel, some of them begin to channel themselves, and they have transdimensional perceptions. They have glimmers and glimpses of beings, guides, some of them angels, some of them ancient sages, Navajo, or someone, a dragon, beings. And I sit and I look at them, and I realize I'm looking at them the way sometimes people look at me, like, that's so interesting. Because the way that it happens is when someone relaxes and learns to trust in the imaginal realm. If you have your analytical mind on it, then it's a paradox in that sense. You can stop it from coming through. You need to learn to relax and be an open vessel. And I think having that experience of starting to channel, from my perspective, and getting over the cancer has allowed me to be more of an open vessel in general, be more open to laughter, be more open to things, be more open to just doing nothing if that's what you want to do. Don't beat yourself up. Don't stress about the small things. It's really not worth it. And we are supposed to have fun, and we are supposed to, not hold on to things. And the two experiences of enabled me to be a lot more. I'm not perfect. I still get stressed out. I still, shout at my girls sometimes. I get stressed out at home of the amount of work to do in the kitchen, for example. But on the whole, I'm much better than I was beforehand. And that's ultimately, when you teach anyone how to channel or channel in front of someone, you're just showing them what they can do. 100%, hand on heart, I believe everyone has the capability. It would be ridiculous of me to say it's just me, or it's just a proving few. It's not. We are all the same. We are all divine beings. We all have these capabilities. We're all non-physical. We're all manifesting and feeling and aware of so much more consciousness than our physical mind is aware of. I've just written my Ph.D. paper on the compartmentalization of the human mind and how it stops us from perceiving transdimensional perception, and bringing down and anchoring down into our normal waking consciousness things such as telepathy, channeling, contact experiences. but I am sure that we're all having them and having a relationship and communication with more expanded consciousness. We're just not aware of it in our normal waking state. And if we do become aware of it, we tend to invalidate it or suppress it.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Discount it, like, oh, that I couldn't have seen that. But it's very valid, and it's very important at this time to be able to have that connection with your more expanded consciousness, even as you or your higher self, because there's so much misinformation out there, and so many rules and regulations and changes and shifting paradigms in society and countries and the world at large, that your true north has got to be within your higher self, your larger connection to your non-physical you, your heart. And there has to be some kind of feedback loop or understanding that you don't have to channel something called Tarp or an angel or something very dramatic. It can just be learning to have the intuition, to hear that voice, to get the feelings, and to make better calls on your own life, your own healing, take control of your own healing journey instead of handing it over to
Anyone.
big corporations and things. Just watching what I'm saying. I think it's very important at this time that people learn to perceive greater consciousness. I mean, we can get into the whole topic of AI. We can't stop that. That's here with us already, and it will get, more and more involved in humanity. There is a way to stay sovereign in this, and that is go into more of the non-physical imaginal realm. This is the realm of where everything is possible. This is the quantum realm, right? Where multiple things, everything exists at the same time. You understand that you're not in the physical world. You're not restrained by time and space. And this is kind of where a lot of intelligence that manifests in our physical world around us on a day-to-day basis comes. It comes from the cloud, it comes from the internet, it comes from all these non-physical places. The AI is also non-physical with the kind of machine learning and intelligence that it comes up with. It doesn't have a soul, right? It's just not divine. We have these capabilities. We've had it learnt, drummed out of us.
This potential.
We've dismantled the communication between the compartments of our psyche so that it's all segregated and separated, much the same way as humanity is very segregated and separated and divided. What does that do? It keeps us from realizing our full potential and our real power. If we can integrate our consciousness, learn to communicate and perceive and bring messages into our normal waking state, we would be aware of power and what information we can pull in about our lives and ourselves. And this is what humans used to do.
Yes. And
we used to be shamanic communities that were able to go in and out of altered states and bring information back into normal waking states and anchor it down to help ourselves. And
we just don't do that anymore, do we? We're just
no.
After it. I think the bandwidth, unfortunately, is going to bring this wonderful chat to a conclusion. But I do think that we have really just touched on some fascinating issues today: the after-death experiences, the role of AI in the future of actually us maintaining our sovereignty, the fasting. I think the autophagy, I can never say the word, is something that possibly people might want to come back to at a later point. So I think if just to close this now this evening, what do you have a motto or a sort of a saying that you stick? Oh, I've lost her. Oh dear. Well, that is terribly unfortunate because we almost found out what Gayle's motto was, and what she kind of had to keep her as her like a carpe diem. But in that hour and a half, the space that we covered, the things that we learned about, and I think we have just touched the top of an iceberg. So I'm going to terminate the recording now, and the hope will be that I can then take this into the realms of both blog and a podcast and other things, possibly YouTube. Thank you for watching, and I do hope that you will join us again for one of these lovely, fascinating chat conversations, interviews that I will be doing over the next few weeks and months. Stay safe.